This law that was passed in the Israeli government, by the Israeli Knesset, the Israeli parliament recently, is a very major law in the Israeli book of laws. First of all, it's a basic law, which means that it is not really part of the Israeli constitution because there is no constitution, but it is a quasi-constitutional law, and it can only be changed with a large majority in the parliament. It cannot be just changed like any other law. First of all, let me say a few words about what is this law, what exactly is the content of it. The official name of the law is the law of the nation state, but no one in Israel calls it that. They call it the law of the nation. There's a very important distinction, and I will talk about this. The law itself is extremely short. It's about 200 words, 11 chapters or clauses, and each clause is about one sentence. And attached to it is a short text of about 1 page, which explains the purpose of the law. But this explanation of the purpose is not part of the law itself. So the law itself is a very short text, which starts by defining what is the state of Israel. What is the flag? What is the name? That's very important. What is the language? What is the calendar? What are the holy days? What is the capital? And the main issue, of course, is that this law says Israel is the state of the Jewish people. It's under the control of the Jewish people, not under the control of its own citizens. The official language is Hebrew. Up until now, there were 3 official languages in the Israeli law, Hebrew, Arabic, and English. But now only Hebrew is an official language, and Arabic has a special standing, but it is no longer considered an official language. And the law also stipulates that the Israeli government is obligated to promote the interests of the Jewish people and Jewish colonization. Jewish colonization, using the Hebrew word for colonization, which is hitishvut, can mean building colonies in the occupied territory, but can also mean building communities for Jews inside Israel. And it says that the capital of Israel is the unified city of Jerusalem. So reinstating the fact that East Jerusalem, which was occupied in 1967, has been annexed. Okay, so that's the text of the law. But here's the thing. Nothing in this law is new. All of this information that I just said has already been in practice by the Israeli courts, by the Israeli political system for decades. Jerusalem was already annexed in 1980. The fact that Hebrew is the only officially recognized official language is something that's already in practice, even though not in the letter of the law. But many Palestinian politicians have written texts in Arabic on official paper and submitted them to Israeli authorities, and they were just thrown away, not read, because Israeli authorities refused to really recognize Arabic as an official language. So it was always only Hebrew, the official language. And of course, colonization is something that the Israeli government has been doing by building communities only for Jews inside Israel and illegal colonies in the occupied territory for many decades. So nothing here is new, which really brings the question, why is this law needed? Now, here's the point. The reason that the official name of the law is Law of the Nation State, but nobody calls it that, is because what this law really does, it makes it clear that Israel is not a nation state. A nation state is a very clearly defined concept in political science. Nation states are nations, or are states in which the nationality and the citizenship coincide. That means that your nationality determines your citizenship determines your nationality. You can be of whatever religion or whatever culture or whatever ethnicity, that doesn't matter. Your nationality is legally recognized based on your citizenship. And in 2017, the United Nations published a report about apartheid in Israel. And this is a very interesting report because it said apartheid is not just the legal system that the Israeli government is implementing in the occupied territory towards Palestinians who live without any citizenship and without any rights in a system which is very clearly a two-tiered apartheid system, one law for the Israeli colonists, one law for the local population. No, he said apartheid is also inside the borders of Israel. It's also apartheid between different levels of citizenship of Israelis. Jewish Israelis or Palestinian Israelis do not have the same rights. And how did the United Nations justify this claim? By making a very interesting distinction. They said, in the state of Israel, there is a distinction between national rights and citizenship rights. You have a certain set of citizenship rights, and you have other rights based on nationality. And all of the collective rights are the nationality rights. So that means that Jews in Israel are not just citizens. That means they don't just have the right to vote and to receive welfare and to use public infrastructure and all that, which is also Palestinians have those rights. The difference is that when it comes to collective rights, the right to bargain collectively, to form unions, the right to form political parties, the right to have demonstrations on the street, the rights to use public money to support cultural events which are associated with religion or nationality, those rights only exist for Jews. And Palestinians don't have access to these rights, but sometimes they are given limited access through a system of privileges. There's a big difference between a privilege and a right. So the Israeli government could say, we're going to let you have your own political party, but if we don't like what you're saying in your political party, we'll kick you out. That's the difference between having a right and having a privilege. So, for example, when Trump came to, the US President Donald Trump came to visit the Israeli Knesset, Palestinian lawmakers, Palestinian members of the Knesset, wanted to protest his visit, and they had signs about Jerusalem being occupied and against moving the American embassy to Jerusalem. And within seconds of them starting the protest, the Israeli Knesset's security force removed them with force from the room, which is something quite unthinkable to do for the Jewish members of the Knesset. And suddenly you had the Israeli Knesset empty of Palestinians. That shows that the right of Jews to have collective representation in the Knesset is enshrined, but for Palestinians there is no right. There is only a privilege. That was already the situation in Israel for many decades, and that's why the United Nations published this report calling it apartheid. The United States put a lot of pressure on the United Nations, and General Secretary Antonio Guterres decided to censor the report, to erase it and remove it from the website of the United Nations. Many organizations have already downloaded it and put it on other websites. It's very easy to find this report today and read it, and I think it's very recommended to read it. It's very interesting. Because of this issue of the difference between nationality rights and citizen rights, I cannot stress enough how important that difference is, because when I speak about this topic with people who grew up in democratic countries, they don't understand me. They say, what do you mean nationality is citizenship? That's how you think about it if you live in a democracy, but that's not the situation in Israel. And so the United States wanted this report to be censored because they thought they were doing a favor for their allies, the state of Israel, but they were not doing them a favor. In fact, the Israeli government did not want this report to be censored. For them, the issue of apartheid has a different meaning, because they're not thinking about what it just means for the Israeli international standing in the world in terms of international relations to other countries. They also think, what is the impact of these concepts on the local population? And the problem that the censoring of this report was for the Israeli government is that it created the illusion as if Israel is not an apartheid state. Why is that illusion a problem? Usually the Israeli government was actually very much in favor of this illusion and tried very strongly to say, no, Israel is not an apartheid state. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. This kind of argument that was promoted by the Israeli government we hear it less and less today, because it is something that is not only heard by diplomats, ambassadors from other countries and so on, it's also something that is heard by the Palestinian population living in Israel. And these people, Palestinians in Israel, hear, oh, Israel is a democracy. Israel is not an apartheid state. Equal rights to everyone. Maybe we should test that. Maybe we should try to demand our rights. Maybe we should try to have a Palestinian Supreme Court chairman of the Supreme Court, or a prime minister or president. Why do we have to agree to be second-class citizens in a state that claims to be a democracy? The law of the nation was originally proposed in 2011, 7 years ago. And it was proposed by several members of the Knesset. One of them is the former commander of the Israeli secret police, with a very clear statement. There is a debate within Israel whether Israel is a Jewish state or a democratic state. The official line of answer was that Israel is both. Somehow you can put these two things together, and there's a lot of arguments if it's even possible to have Jewish state and a democratic state at the same time. My personal opinion is that no, you have to choose, because if you promote one group of people over the others, then you lose democracy. If you have equal rights to everyone, then it's not a Jewish state. It's a state where Jews, just like any other group of people, can have equal rights and all of the same benefits from the government. So this group of Israeli politicians said, no, we want to make it very clear that Israel is Jewish first, democratic second. There is a distinction. There is a hierarchy. And the Jewishness is more important than the democracy. That was a very important reason for promoting the law. But the law was not brought up for a vote in 2011, and not in the last 7 years that passed, because the Israeli government said, we don't really need to make a decision on the issue of democracy versus Judaism. We can leave it ambiguous. We can have all the kind of policies that we want, and many of these very discriminatory policies against Palestinian citizens of Israel have been in place without any problems for decades. Why should we put it down in a law that will expose our policies as unjust, as racist, as discriminatory? We have nothing to gain from that. Until the United States put pressure on the United Nations to censor the apartheid report. And now the Israeli government changed its opinion. Now they have something to lose and something to gain, because now they're afraid people might think that there are equal rights and that Israel is a democracy, and then they might demand equality. And the Israeli government wants to stop that movement. They want to stop people from demanding equality and democratic rights. Now Netanyahu is currently, the Prime Minister of Israel, is currently involved in several corruption affairs. And because of those corruption affairs, he might be put on trial. And there could be an attempt to indict him in court. And that is unprecedented in the history of Israel. So he is trying to convince the state attorney not to press charges against him. But the problem is that the evidence is quite clear, and the state attorney is going to press charges against him sooner or later. Netanyahu then decided to adopt a different kind of strategy, to call for an early election. If the election comes quickly, he knows that he's quite popular and that he's going to win almost certainly. So if the state attorney then says, I want to press charges against you, Netanyahu will say, oh, this is a political decision. We're just before an election. You cannot press charges against me just before an election. And that will be his defense mechanism. But that was the problem for Netanyahu, that just before an election, that if he brings the election so soon, there will be a lot of people asking, what did you do when you were prime minister last time? What did you achieve? in terms of the economic situation, in terms of the standard of living, he achieved nothing. The situation in Israel has been very, very stable, but there were no improvements in the last couple of years. The only things that Netanyahu claims that he's been able to achieve was better relationship with Saudi Arabia and other Sunni Arab monarchies, like the UAE, and that's something that, because it's not official, there are no documents, it's also something that's not particularly important for Israeli citizens to know that Israel is now becoming good friends with Saudi Arabia. Good relations with the United States, sure, but this is more because of Donald Trump than it is because of Netanyahu. So he needs something to show to the public before the elections. And then he said, okay, so what we will show to the public is that we finally legislated the law of the nation. Law of the nation, not law of the nation state. Because Israel is not a nation state, and now it's very clear. I think there's one more point that we need to say about this law, and that is how actually this law changes the name of Israel. Because the word Israel has many different meanings. I think for our viewers who have been to church, for example, especially evangelical churches in Germany or in France, they would notice that the word Israel is used in the churches with a different meaning than the state of Israel. It means a people. And in fact, over the years, centuries before the founding of the state of Israel, the word Israel just meant Jewish. It's a reference to a biblical figure, Yaakov, who changed his name to Israel. But people would say sons of Israel or daughters of Israel, meaning like the descendants of that person, and then they just made it short for Israel, meaning the people who originate from that story. And that had nothing to do with any particular state. During the rule of the Nazis in Germany, they have forced every Jewish male under their rule to change their name, and they changed their name forcibly in their identification papers to call them Israel. So because they refused to recognize the rights of Jews to be individuals and to have their own individual names, they were all just called Israel. And that was not to refer them to any kind of state, because the state of Israel was not even founded. So when the state of Israel was founded in 1948, David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister, said, we will call it the State of Israel, which in other words is the Jewish state. But rabbis from all over the world wrote him a letter and said, no, you cannot use that name because this is our name. You can give your country whatever name you want, but you cannot call it after us because we are using that name still. We are Israel. And Ben-Gurion answered to them and said, no, I am confiscating the name. And from now on, it belongs to the State of Israel. But the thing is that the State of Israel actually was not very clear on its own name. And that's something very interesting, and I think it's very telling about the colonial nature of that kind of society, that everything has to be left very unofficial. Everything has to be not written down. So I'm looking at my own documents as a citizen of the State of Israel, and I see that I have an identity card and I have a passport. These are my personal documents, and sometimes it says State of Israel, and sometimes it says Israel. The name of the country is not clear. The State of Israel means the Jewish state. Israel means Jews. That's a very different kind of statement. It reminds me, unfortunately, of the Islamic State. Because the Islamic State is also an attempt to confiscate a religion and to say, actually, the Islamic State represents all of the Muslims in the world without asking them what they think about it. And I think it's interesting to see that Muslims all around the world have refused to be identified with the Islamic State, and they don't call it the Islamic State. They call it ISIS or ISIL, the Islamic State in Syria or the Islamic State in the Levant. These are and in Arabic as well. Instead of Dawlat Islamiyya, they call it Dawlat Islamiyya in Iraq wal Sham or Daesh. So they're using a different name than the people who are in the Islamic State are using for themselves. And unfortunately, when it came to the State of Israel, Jews around the world who opposed that, the founding of the State of Israel, did not really think of finding a different name for it to try to delegitimize it. They just kept using the name. So this is really something that is important to see now, that the State of Israel now no longer exists officially. Now there is Israel only with a new name. The law is something that brings to the surface a lot of things that have already been in practice. There's a lot of resistance to it. And I think it's interesting to see that the biggest resistance to the Israeli government after the law was passed was from various minority groups inside the State of Israel who were more privileged under the very hierarchical system of privileges that the Israeli government has created. Mainly Bedouins and Palestinians of the Druze religion. Druze followers, who some of them have been very loyal to the State of Israel and joined the military and saw themselves as full Israelis. And now in this law of the nation, it says very much at the top, there is a difference between the citizens of the State of Israel and the Jewish people. The national rights in this country only go to Jews, not to anyone else. As a result of that, many of the Druze and many of the Bedouins have said we are no longer going to serve in the Israeli army, and we do not consider ourselves to be loyal to the State of Israel anymore.